You're watching Euronews now. I'm Ramzadi, and these are the headlines this hour. Moscow announces the end of the first phase of the so-called special operation in Ukraine, saying it will now focus on establishing control of the eastern Donbas region. The deadliest attack on civilians so far. Ukraine says the death toll from a Russian airstrike on the theatre in Mariupol now stands at 300. The EU summit wraps in Brussels as leaders reaffirm phasing out dependency on Russian energy as soon as possible.
And here in theCUBE, we take a closer look at a new EU law that could rein in the powers of big tech companies.
Good evening. In what could signal a change in military strategy, Moscow has announced the end of the first phase of the so-called special operation in Ukraine. Senior Russian defense official Sergei Rudskoy said that Ukraine's fighting capacity has been reduced and Russian forces could now focus on taking control of the eastern Donbas region. The announcement comes as the Pentagon says that Russia has lost full control of Kherson, the first major Ukrainian city it captured. Well, let's now take a closer look at how the ground offensive is advancing in Ukraine. Sasha Vakulina breaks down the latest military movements across the country.
1 month since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and the Institute for the Study of War released an animated map describing how it happened. Now, it starts on the 23rd of February, the day before, and then it goes step by step, date by date, on the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Look at this. Here in the red, you could see these are the Russian troops as they invaded and tried to get as much territory as possible. The 10th of March, the 11th of March, the 12th. You could see how they tried, coming from the east of the country and the north of Ukraine, how they tried to get towards the central part of Ukraine and towards Kyiv, the capital. Now, according to the latest information and the latest map, this is how the situation looks now. The Russian forces they're indicating the red with the direction of their moves or their intentions. And here in the blue, if you could see here in the south and the southeast of the country, also in the east towards Kharkiv and Luhansk, those blue areas are the areas of massive protests of Ukrainian people on those territories now occupied by Russian troops against this occupation. The situation also looks different in the region of Kyiv, the capital. Look at this. This is the map that goes with the radius of 25 kilometers around Kyiv. And here in the blue, you could see these are the areas that Ukrainian troops started to taking back. This is where they started their counterattacks, regaining some of the territories. Of course, also here, this is the west and the northwest of Kyiv. This is where some of the heaviest fightings has been happening during this month of war. Now, the fact that Ukrainian troops have been regaining some towns back and getting their defensive positions back is now also confirmed by the UK's Defence Ministry and their latest intelligence update.
Local officials in the Ukrainian city of Mariupol say that as many as 300 people were killed in the March 16th bombing of a theatre where hundreds of civilians were seeking shelter. Russia has denied responsibility for the airstrike, which hit the building despite the word children being written in large white letters outside the theatre. If the death toll is confirmed, it would be the deadliest known attack on civilians since the start of the war 1 month ago. Ukraine is still struggling to evacuate thousands of people who remain trapped in the besieged port city. Euronews international correspondent Annalise Borges is in the western city of Lviv, where she's been talking to Ukrainians who have managed to escape Mariupol. They shared some harrowing stories of the destruction and heartbreak they left behind. Take a look.
I was born in Mariupol and lived in Mariupol my entire life. It was so beautiful lately. It was a city one could live in. We had the sea. All was good. I love the sea so much. I will not see the sea ever again.
This is Mariupol now, after 4 weeks of almost non-stop Russian shelling. Natalia witnessed most of it from the basement of her home.
It was right above our heads. Planes would fly from 3 a.m., and every 10 minutes you would hear a plane passing. And I guess some of our defense system was nearby, and they would fire. And every time they hit a target, everything shook. We were just sitting there thinking the next one is for us. The next one is for us.
Natalia survived 20 days without electricity, running water, and very little food. Many of her neighbors weren't so lucky.
The house next to us was hit by a bomb. The house got destroyed, and our neighbors stayed under the rubble. And 2 other neighbors went to get him out and were killed by the shelling.
With most humanitarian corridors failing to evacuate civilians, her son-in-law, Victor, took the desperate decision to go in and take Natalia out. He wasn't prepared for what he saw.
It looked like hell. 90% of the buildings were hit. Half of them were burned, and then there were a lot of dogs in the street. You could see they are roaming around in search for food, and there were piles of trash. I saw 2 bodies. One was covered, and the other was the guy who they just laid in the street, and explosions all the time, and planes are flying in the skies. I felt like I was in a game or something, it was like a computer game or something, and then I cannot still believe that it happened.
Victor doesn't want to be identified because he is scared of not having access to Russian-controlled areas in the coming weeks, as he hopes to continue helping people on the other side. As for Mariupol, he says he doesn't think the city will be rebuilt.
I'm really at a loss what to say. I don't see any future there anyways. I don't know, not at least for the following 10 years, 20 years.
Thank you very much, Vladimir Putin.
Annelies Borges in Lviv for Euronews.
A 2-day EU leaders summit in Brussels has come to an end. The talks centred largely on strategies aimed at dealing with Europe's dependency on Russian energy. President Biden had praised Western allies for unity in the face of President Putin's military aggression. But after lengthy discussions in the European Council, tensions appeared to surface. Our correspondent Shona Murray was following the action in Brussels, and she has this report.
The EU's 2-day summit has been much longer and tense than expected. Heads of state and government are trying to find ways to contain the skyrocketing rise in energy prices. There was clear division between those that were for and against intervening in the energy market for fear of disrupting supply chains and the role of renewables. Finally, an arrangement was made for Spain and Portugal, who were asking for a temporary cap on electricity prices.
Indeed, the Iberian Peninsula has a very special situation. There, the energy mix is with a high load of renewables. This is very good. And with very few interconnections only. And therefore, we agreed on a special treatment that is possible for the Iberian Peninsula so that the Iberian Peninsula can deal with this very specific situation they are in.
Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez was one of the most belligerent countries. At one point, he even left the meeting room in protest. Among the most reluctant countries to intervene and accept his proposals was the Netherlands. But during the summit, other decisions were taken. EU leaders wanted the European Commission to negotiate the common purchase of gas in the name of the 27 member states in order to get better prices. There was also an agreement on the need for increasing the levels of gas storage in Europe ahead of next winter.
75% of the global pipeline gas market is the European market. So we have an enormous purchasing power. And therefore, I welcome that we will now use our collective bargaining power. Instead of outbidding each other and driving prices up, we will pool our demand.
The war in Ukraine is one of the reasons for the rise in energy prices, and everybody understands that Europe must be more autonomous and less dependent on Russian gas. Also because it's one of the main sources of income for Moscow to finance the war. Shona Murray, Euronews, Brussels.
Earlier in the day, US President Joe Biden and EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen announced a major deal on natural gas aimed at reducing Europe's reliance on Russian energy. Washington and its partners are set to increase gas exports to Europe, starting with an additional 15 billion cubic metres this year. Europe currently depends on Moscow for 40% of its total gas supply, a situation von der Leyen says is no longer tenable.
As you know, we aim to reduce this dependency on Russian fossil fuels and to get rid of it. And this can only be achieved through, of course, first of all, investment in renewables, but also through additional gas supplies, including LNG deliveries. So we want, as Europeans, to diversify away from Russia towards suppliers that we trust, that are friends, and that are reliable.
Now, after leaving Brussels, President Joe Biden travelled to Poland for a two-day visit. On arrival, he visited US soldiers from the 82nd Airborne Division, based near the Ukrainian border. Before leaving for Warsaw and talks with his Polish counterpart, Andrzej Duda, Biden reminded the troops of why they're there.
The single most important thing that we can do from the outset is keep the democracies united in our opposition and our effort to curtail the devastation that is occurring at the hands of a man who, I quite frankly, think is a war criminal. And I think it will meet the legal definition of that as well.